week one. Look at this. I know you're like normally the first week, there's like a honeymoon period where we actually get to know each other and you slowly get into the class. But no, this class, we're like, get in the game, right? That's because it's an accelerated class. So let's take a look at this case study. I had to go through and delete a bunch of videos because, or lectures. I had to delete them because they weren't ADA compliant, which meant that there weren't subtitles. So I've had to go through and do that. I deleted them, so now I'm going to redo this one. So let's go through. Where the heck is it? Right here, it's Dare to Go. This really is an interesting case study, and I'll tell you why. Because it's absolutely real. And you could obviously it's an older case study, and maybe I'll update it using AI. We'll see what happens. But this is real. As entrepreneurs, your very first company, you probably already have a job, and but you tend to come across an idea, and here's the two paths to entrepreneurship really are need based. In that, man, I got to do something, and or opportunity based, in that you just sort of come up, oh my gosh, this would be a great idea. And so in this particular case, Mary has come up with an idea, and she's trying to figure out whether she should do it or not. And if you look at some of the notes here, I don't let you read it, but there's a couple things I really want us to point out. Is let's assume we got to make some assumptions when we're building these cases. One of them is, where is Mary? How old is Mary? Let's have a conversation about Mary's current life. And so if we just take, let's assume, right? She's had this job for 7 years. It's her first job. So Mary's what? Somewhere between 29 and 30 years old. And some questions you've got to ask yourself, right? Does she have a partner of some kind? Um, and that's a variable, right? If you've got a relationship, those things are going to impact the business. And I can tell you one of the reasons why I think I've had a fair amount of success in my life is I've got a good partner. I call her, after 32 years, I still call her my startup wife. And because she really is, she's like, I get it. One year you're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the next year you're going to make like $12. Let's work it out. And so you've got to have that support, or when you're in the middle of trying to execute, you've got chaos, right? So kids, right? I do this case study in my intro to business class on campus. Only one semester, I had somebody go, she has a kid. Man, that completely blew everything up, because how do you take care of the kid, when you're in the middle of doing this, right? She's got friends and she's got family, right? And when we get to family, you got to define this a little bit more, right? Where does she fall? Is she old? Is she the youngest, right? If she didn't have kids, do her siblings have kids? Because, she's an aunt. So when you're the aunt missing, you're probably the favorite aunt. Picture her being the favorite aunt. You don't want to miss these kids' birthdays, but heck, you might be on the East Coast. And so you really you gotta figure that out. And then the parents, right? How old are the parents? So she's 30, so we could easily assume that the parents are in the 60 to 70 or 80 range, right? Depending on whether she's the baby or is she the oldest. And now there's a lot that goes into that with parents, right? People start getting into their 70s and 80s, they need care. Mom fell, dad had an issue of some sort, and how is that going to influence when she's like somewhere else? She's got friends and responsibilities, and the reason why I do this part of it is because the business execution side is easy, right? Can she make money? Can she do this during this period of time? Can she figure out how she's gonna get more customers? All those things, that's planning. All these other variables, these are other things that are sort of external forces that plague entrepreneurs. I hear these stories all the time. And these are the external forces. So if we get into the case study, the reason why this is so important is that if we look at where her customers are, so the other thing is we have to determine, where is she? So let's assume she went to San Jose State. She's in the Bay Area. But you can pick the place because it doesn't matter. You're going to have chaos regardless. So she's identified 10 customers, right? 6 of the 10 firms are located on the East Coast. Two of them are in the Midwest, and 2 are in California. So if she's in San Jose and she's got 6 clients that are on the East Coast, let's assume that there's 2 in Boston, 2 in New York, maybe 2 in Atlanta, and she's got to be there, right? So it takes 2 weeks to do the installation. She's roughly got, she's got almost 3 weeks to do installations. And let's see, how is it? I think it's 2 weeks to do the installation. So she's got a month and a half worth of work on the East Coast, and a month worth of work in the Midwest, right? So assume Chicago, Dallas. What is she going to do? Is she just going to like relocate to New York? That would be a blast. I spent a month in New York when I went through some training with Morgan Stanley, and it was the time of my life. But I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. My parents were healthy. There were I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. It was perfect. But, depending on the picture you paint of Mary, can she disappear for a month and a half and then come back, for a weekend and then go to Chicago and Dallas for another month? So when you are really thinking through this, everybody tends to focus on, yes, she should go do it and it would be great. And she's young and this is the time for her to go conquer the world. But we have to really consider some external forces. And how could those external forces plague or potentially be problematic, right? Because if you are the favorite aunt and you miss a 3-year-old's birthday party, I mean, you've missed 1/3 of all their birthday parties. I mean, I've seen people that were just heartbroken because they missed birthday parties, and maybe that's not you, right? And if it's not you, awesome. It just depends on the relationship you have with your family. So, but it's absolutely a variable depending on the picture that you paint for Mary. So I do want you to factor that into the equation. What do you think? Should she do it? And then there's the other side of this. Is there another way she could do this? Is there a way she could do this with her current employer? And what would that potentially look like? Would there be less risk? Could there potentially be as much upside? Would it still be the amount of fulfillment that she is seeking, right? Um, and so on the surface, seems like an easy case study. When you really start to, like most of these case studies, as you begin to peel back the layers, we need to look at this from a much more holistic, a broader view, and factor in all the non-business factors into the equation. So I hope that was confusing, because these things should be a little confusing. It shouldn't be a no-brainer for you just to knock these out in 10 minutes, because you really got to think about this. If you tell Mary to go do this, and Mary is recently married, and maybe she doesn't have a startup husband or a startup partner, what's the risk there? And it's hilarious. In my on-campus classes, I had one whole class, the whole class. It was last semester, the Monday, Wednesday, 9 a.m. class. It was hilarious. Every last team that had females said, get rid of the guy and go do this. You'll find another guy when you're done. It was brilliant. It was really, and it'll be interesting to see, because I'll be presenting this class in this case in a couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see how, what the students' answers are. But I don't advocate for that at all. But it's just very interesting to hear some students and their perspectives. So hope you find this enjoyable. As always, if you got questions, hit me up. Peace.